Hello and welcome, everybody, critics, etc., to another episode of Critical Conversations. I just had to verify the sound and everything was all good. Hello, welcome to the live show. Happy New Year, everybody. We are now in 2023, although from my show intro, you might think we're in a 90s dance club. And hi, I'm so glad that you are joining me here live for this show, or of course on if you're watching this later after it was posted, then welcome to the show. Live from Denver. That's right, it is Friday night and this is Critical Conversations. Now I'm here alone. I really, it's only been a couple years. I really should formalize my intro at this point. It's a little silly. I sort of ad-libbed the whole thing at the beginning. But anyway, yeah, another great year. Yes, thank you, Henny. Good times all around. Happy to see all the usual suspects in the comments here. The old rocking intro. Okay, well, that changes can happen. So we'll see how all this goes. Mel, of course, is feeling a little under the weather tonight, and the ups and downs and vagaries of life. So I'm flying solo tonight. So you just get little old me. Boy, what an exciting time to be alive, huh? Yes, definitely Happy New Year to everybody. And man, interesting things. There was an interesting story that dropped today about the interview that I did with the jury foreman that Tony Ortega and I did. Tony dropped a video about it. Aaron dropped a video about it. I guess I'll talk about it. Only into the degree that I know that, there is an idea, or there could be an idea that, is it a good idea to air that video? Is it a good idea for that interview to be out there? Well, yes, it is. And the reasons why are that, in case there's any question about this, and I don't have any question about it, but it has been raised. So my official response is that we did that interview in the interest of quelling false information that was running rampant through the ex-Scientology world, that it was Scientology and fair gaming and the jury had been gotten to and blah, blah, blah. Lots and lots of conjecture was flying all over the place after that mistrial was declared, and there was a lot of mystery and a lot of confusion as to, well, what the hell just happened? And the only person who could tell us was somebody who was in the jury room, and that opportunity presented itself, and there was absolutely no way that it made sense to pass that up, given the amount of vital information that we learned from it about Scientology and about how Scientology had not even really been part of the process. And most important of all, we learned, regardless of what happens in the future, that this case's prosecution was faulty. It was bad. It was poorly done. The jury did not get it. And what the jury did get was a lot of confusion and misunderstanding what was happening. And they did not get their brows beaten hard enough, these the jury members, about their own bias. They walked in there with so much implicit bias about rape victims and about women and about situations and drinking and sex and relationships. I mean, so many assumptions and nonsense brought into that jury room by some of these jurists, by some of the jury members. So, that was what we revealed. Nobody would know any of that if we hadn't done that interview. Did it have a negative effect on, whether there's going to be a retrial? Well, we have no idea. But if given a choice of having the information out there or not out there in a case like this, where it's actually going to help clarify the situation, and most important of all, help future prosecutions of this kind, of any kind like this, then of course I'm going to do that. And of course that needs to be out there. And I really do hope that there is a competent, efficient retrial that actually gets across to the jury the facts of this case and gets past their conjecture and bias and bullshit and actually gets to them the Scientology angle and influence of this, because it's fucking huge. Pardon my French, but it is. And, and having this kind of thing out there, yeah, exactly, as David here says, right? Aaron was right. Having that information is important for the DA. That was part of the reason we did it, is we wanted them to get how this case had been lost or mistried so that they could fix it and do it better next time. That's what we want. And at least be able to use, whether there is or isn't a retrial on the criminal side, use the information we learned from this jury in the civil case, because the civil case is not necessarily an automatic home run, knock it out of the park. And knowing what people, average Joe, never been exposed to Scientology, have no idea what it's all about. What are they going to walk into that jury room thinking about Scientology, about the case, about how it's presented? Well, probably not a lot if you don't get the hardcore facts of the situation to them. And that was what was not done in this case. Scientology had every advantage in this case because the judge and the prosecutor were completely hamstrung in their ability to even talk about it or even mention the word. It was barely registering on the jury's radar at all. And that is, to me, the biggest error or omission or problem with the prosecution's case. There were other problems as we went over, but I think those were some of the biggest ones. And anyway, yeah, seeing you guys guys responding here on this, I think that this is actually really important. And I think and I think you guys are getting it. The other thing, of course, along with this is, in addition to what the interview exposed or talked about, what it didn't do was support the defense. Not in the way they're trying to get the case dismissed right now by using that evidence. Who cares what the last jury thought? It's the next jury that we care about at this point, and we're going to use that information to present a better case to them for the defense to come forward. Obviously, it's their job. And say, well, let's just dismiss. Remember, they asked for a mistrial like 8 times during this thing, right? They were desperate to get anything to happen to dismiss this case, dismiss these charges, free Danny. And that's their job. That's what they're paid an awful lot of money to do. Way more money than I'm ever going to see. And that's what happens. So I'm not surprised, shocked, what the hell with what the defense has done in putting this together and saying, well, we shouldn't, dismiss these charges. It's not worth retrying. But I really hope that the DA, whose decision it is to do this, is not falling for the nonsense. I hope that this is a person who is paying enough attention to this, and that's one of probably hundreds of cases that are coming across his plate. So, I hope that a good decision is made here. And I hope for success in that, as well as, of course, with the civil trial. Okay. Yeah, so there we go with all of that. Yeah, I don't know what else you guys. Okay, cool. Okay, well, that's interesting. I have not been keeping up with Aaron's channel too much. I've been too busy working on my stuff. One thing I wanted to share with you guys, and I'm actually kind of, I'm not as excited as I was a couple days ago because I've gotten into the actual work of it now, and I'm probably going to need an editor. I'm going to need somebody, not an editor as in somebody to edit my videos, but I'm going to need to run this by somebody because I've produced a script for this tone scale video, the emotional tone scale in Scientology, one of the most powerful and fundamental tools of coercive control in Scientology. It is one of the most powerful and foundational things they have, is this emotional tone scale. We're going to switch over now to this topic. And this has been a long time coming. This has been the sort of the precursor to the metering video that I've been promising for literally years, ridiculous amounts of time. Well, I finally sat down, banged the thing out, started putting it together. It's actually, I've got the video file and I've got the audio tracks laid down. and it's an hour and a half long. And I'm like, oh my God, this is way too much. I have put together something that is ridiculously long. So I'm trying to now pare it down a bit because I don't think any of y'all want to watch a full documentary takedown on, some documentary length video taking down the tone scale. But then again, what do you think? I mean, because I'm just sitting here in my chair making these snap decisions about this, like, oh God, this is too much. I didn't try to throw in the kitchen sink. I tried to make a couple of clear-cut arguments about emotion and what it is, what we know about it, the tone scale, Hubbard's formulation of it, the ridiculousness of it, some of the key quotes from Hubbard that describe how he came up with it, wavelengths and all this bullshit, and then there's a whole section which exposes some criminal activity on the part of L. Ron Hubbard all the way back in 1951 that was happening at the exact same time that Hubbard was writing this treatise, this book, this tome, Science of Survival, the second book of Dianetics. This book was written during the time that Hubbard was on a bender, was completely out of his, was paranoid out of his mind, and was committing a bunch of criminal actions. So I thought, well, there's something to talk about that should fit into this timeline, And then, of course, we go into, some of the ridiculous ways that Scientology actually uses this emotion and emotional manipulation and emotional blackmail to control its members, right? That's basically a synopsis or a sort of, kind of walkthrough or outline of what I've put together. And it's taken me a really long time to do it. I needed to learn an awful lot about emotion. And only, of course, to realize and come to a place where you learn, oh, we really don't know that much about it. And it's kind of one of those big, long journeys around the world to come back around and go, oh, yeah, everything was kind of simple and stupid, and nobody really knew a whole lot about it in the first place. I mean, that's kind of what you know, and then you go all the way around learning all this stuff, only to come around to realizing that's the state of things, right? Is there's an awful lot of controversy, disagreement, and ignorance about the subject of emotions. I personally am absolutely fascinated by them, and I'm fascinated by the power and influence that they have over us, and how, of course, from my view of things, how they can be manipulated against us. Okay, now, this is a call-in show. I've been rattling on here, and we are going to get into how to stay out of a cult in 2023. I do have some pointers for you guys that I wanted to go over, but I wanted to address this other stuff first and ended up taking up all this time here. So let's go ahead and get into, because I have a call in the queue, so let's go ahead and pick it up and see where we're at. Hello, you were on.
Hello.
Hi. Hey, David.
How are you?
I am good. How are you today?
Pretty well, pretty good. Yeah. It's been a couple of weeks, and I'm sure you can probably think of the video that I'm probably going to want to comment on the most.
Yeah, what you got?
It would be the one with John P. Capitalist on China. And
yeah, you watched that. Oh, good. Somebody watched it.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
What'd you think?
Yeah. Well, honestly, I could almost do a line-by-line commentary on the first 40 minutes, the introduction, the whole stuff about culture as well, and a little bit, obviously, about the whole propaganda thing. I'm not going to... When I was in the Oxford Union Standing Committee, we would get requests by members of the House of Lords who would actually write to us trying to invite themselves to come to debate. Now, I wouldn't be audacious enough to do the same, but it is the kind of thing that I think I would need an hour to explain all that I would have to say on such a broad topic.
Yeah, we talked about a lot of stuff. It's a 2.5-hour podcast, and we really went pretty deep as far as I'm concerned. So what do you want to talk about on it?
Yeah. That's just the first 40 minutes.
Yeah. There's a lot of stuff we put in there.
Well, the first thing I would say is that on the whole topic of China and the like, one of the things that you mentioned that I think I should respond to quickly is the idea that, human rights are not universal in the respect that it was discussed about culture and everything. That's actually what I'm doing my PhD in at the moment, is on human rights and the universality of human rights.
No shit. Wow.
The exam. Yeah, genuinely, that's what I'm doing my PhD on at the moment.
That's awesome.
So what I would say, there's two things that come to mind quickly, and they are that other countries with Confucian ideas like South Korea and Japan have both embraced human rights culture quite enthusiastically. And I think, if anything, South Korea is a bit more interesting than Japan on this, because Japan was occupied by America and had its constitution written by America, whereas South Koreans had to fight for their rights in the 1970s and the 1980s. They got their rights, and they wanted the same rights that we all take for granted. The other example that I use is Latin America. In the 1970s and the 1980s,
Hello? I lost the call suddenly here. Okay, we still have video and everything, but the call just totally zonked out on us. Yep, phone's still going, line still connected. Okay, well, I'm going to disconnect this call, and maybe David can call back in, because I'm kind of curious what the point of where he was going with that. And in the meantime, we will carry on. I'm sure he will call back. Trying to manipulate this sense. Yeah, emotional manipulation is fun stuff. It's all around us, obviously, right? And it's context specific. Let me just address a couple of things that are, I don't know that this is what's being talked about, but just briefly going through here. Emotional manipulation is kind of like one of those things where it's really context specific as to whether it's a good or a bad thing. It's not, we talk about it as terms of all the negative aspects of it. But the fact is that, when you fall in love with somebody, you're kind of, they're manipulating you, you're manipulating them. But we don't really use the word manipulation when we think about that stuff. Okay, looks like David is back on the line here. So let's go ahead and get right back into this call. And then we will see about bringing up some topics on the staying out of a cult in 23. Here we go. Okay, David, you're back.
Hi. So how much did you hear before it disconnected?
I remember you were talking about South Korea and how they had to fight for their rights, and it was the 70s and 80s, and they finally, had gotten them or were pushing for them, and I think you cut off shortly after that.
Okay, so I think that's better than Japan. It's a better example than Japan about universality of human rights, because the Japanese had their constitution written by MacArthur, whereas the South Koreans didn't, and the Americans supported a dictatorship in South Korea, and yet the South Koreans fought for the same human rights that we take for granted.
Yes.
And the second example I use is Latin America. Latin America in the 80s and early 90s had a number of dictatorships collapse. And what happened? All the people wanted freedom. This is a region of the world that is quite homogenous, quite culturally distinct, and yet people still wanted freedom. There's something universal there.
I agree. And I think that that's why there is such ready agreement on the concept or subject of human rights and the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. Correct me if I'm wrong, but aren't there only 2 or 3 countries that have refused to ratify it?
I think there are no countries that have refused to ratify
the
Universal Declaration of Human Rights. so the Universal Periodic Review Mechanism of the Human Rights Council, even North Korea has submitted reports to that.
Wow. That's a joke.
Yeah.
Huh.
It is. It is a joke.
North Korea, are you kidding me right now?
Make recommendations to Norway.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't...
Saudi Arabia can tell Norway to please prohibit the discussion of Muhammad.
Right. And that's actually I scoff, but that's actually one of the barriers to getting stuff like that across is some of our cross-cultural values and ideas are just so inherently in conflict that it makes it really hard. I mean, you really got to have some really pro guys working out or moderating those differences between certain cultures on this planet, you know?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
But
what I would say is that there is a time and a place for that cross-cultural dialogue, and I actually think that our dealings with the Islamic world is a good example of that. There is also a time and a place for saying that there is no dialogue to be had. Whenever I was judging the Oxford IV about 5 or 6 years ago, one of the motions was this House would encourage diplomats to use diplomatic immunity to shield political protests. And the person speaking in proposition said, and he was right, under no circumstances should the hanging of a person from a crane on account of who they love be something that we just tolerate as part of culture, obviously talking about Iran.
Yeah, I agree. And that's what I mean exactly by the kind of, you know, mutually exclusive cultural values that we run into as we run into things where we just can't do it. And there was, if I recall correctly, I was really only on the fringes of this, and I wonder what your comment is as somebody over in the UK. I was barely paying attention to the World Cup, the FIFA event, right? That happened in, so was I. What was that, in Qatar or something?
Qatar, yeah.
Right? Not Iran or Iraq, but, you know, Qatar, I think, is considered ally. But still, you know, once you get boots on the ground and you find out what people actually had to do and how they had to get vetted and what the rules they had to comply with, you're like, holy cow, man, I would never go there.
They reneged on several of their agreements with FIFA as well.
Oh, did
Budweiser are going to sue them, apparently.
Interesting. It
was said that you could serve alcohol in stadiums.
Oh, right, exactly, that whole alcohol thing. Yeah, like I said, I was barely on the fringes of it because I'm not a soccer fan at all. But I was trying to pay a little bit of attention through social media to the cultural clashes, and I wondered about that because it seemed to me. I understand the fact that when you have an international organization that spans cultures and it's a sports-oriented organization, it might not be in its best interest to get involved in or make its decisions based on ideological differences. But it sure as hell seems to me that human rights differences would be something that would be on the table. And I guess it's not. Well, and that's what surprised me.
In the abstract, I obviously agree with you. In the concrete case of Qatar, the stupidest thing is that Qatar should never have been awarded the World Cup. It was basically bribed. So if there'd been any kind of moral integrity from FIFA, we wouldn't even need to have this debate because they never would have got the World Cup. Because how can you host a World Cup in a country like that, in that region of the world, just in terms of the climate anyway?
Exactly. Okay, let me ask you one more question, David, then I'm going to probably need to let you go. But since I have you on the line and I now know you're doing this PhD on human rights, I'm curious. I have said, and much to my, frustration, that the most educational materials I have seen for children on the subject of human rights are produced by the Church of Scientology. They have these PSAs.
Unite for Human Rights.
Yeah, the Youth for Human Rights public service announcements. They're little 60-second clips, and they walk through every principle of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights in an easy-to-understand, humorous, upbeat way, and it communicates to kids. and it communicates the human rights, and it doesn't have any weird Scientology twists or corruption or taint to it that I could ever see. Yeah. So I'm curious, have you seen those, and what do you think?
I've seen them, and I actually do. I think their quality and their production values are very high. And honestly, I wouldn't have an objection to use of those materials so long as you did your best to keep the Scientology connection out of it.
Right. And that's, damn near impossible with that group because of their nature. But the materials themselves, just in a vacuum, are like really quite good. They really are.
Oh, they are very high quality. Yes.
Yeah.
And I'll leave you with one thought on the staying out of a cult thing just before I go.
Yeah, what you got?
My first thought on how to stay out of a cult in 2023, and I mean, this is probably going to be a positive end to the call, is that today the best advice you would give somebody with how cults are at the moment is probably don't be born into one, because they're not recruiting anywhere near as successfully as they used to.
That's right. That's exactly right. This is perfect. I was going to make that exact point. So thank you for. So you and I do often parallel in our thinking, which is funny to me. So anyway,
yes,
thank you.
We do seem to.
Yeah. So it's kind of funny.
Yes.
Thank you, David, for the call, and I'll talk to you again soon, huh?
Oh yeah, great to be back.
Yeah. Bye-bye, man.
Bye-bye.
All right. Good. So let us. Let me address a little bit of what's going on in the comments a little bit here, because I see this back and forth on Aaron's channel and stuff. And basically all I want to say is somebody said early on in the comments here that this channel is about in-depth, going deep on this stuff, and that is absolutely the case. Other channels have a different purpose or a different activity. And if you want to drum up clicks and you want to talk about the salaciousness of Scientology and the awful horribleness of it, and I do, and all of us do. But if that's all you want to talk about, you don't ever want to go deeper, you don't ever want to look into how to fix it, other groups that are involved in that kind of thing, that is absolutely a choice that I think Aaron's making, and I'm fine with it. It's what he's doing. And he's getting a lot of viewership, and he's getting a lot of exposure of Scientology out there, and he's getting it on people's, getting people talking about it or looking into it. And I can't ever fault that. And hopefully, if people want a deeper look, then they come over to my channel and dive into what I've produced here for them as well. So that's sort of my overview take on the thing. I know people have varying ideas on this, and that's totally fine with me. Yes, Andrew Tate did find out the hard way. Now, we've got this super chat earlier from Darla. I see this, Darla. Thank you very much for this awesome super chat. And you've asked me a question here. I am certain you've answered this question before. However, I may have missed it. Why did you choose Denver to move to after leaving Twin Cities? And I will tell you exactly why. Because it's actually really simple. I was invited out here by an ex-Scientologist, somebody that I had met on Facebook. I'm not going to get into who it was. But anyway, somebody invited me out here to check it out. They were like, hey, Mark and Claire are out here. We're out here. There's another couple out here. You're out there in Minnesota. And this was after I had been declared, lost everything in terms of my fiance and my relationships and all that stuff. All that was gone. So, excuse me. So I was really wondering, what am I doing in Minnesota? Why am I out here? Because it's, if Denver's cold, but Denver's nothing compared to Minnesota. Minnesota is its own world of pain when it comes to snowfall and temperature drop. And I spent a lot of time out there. So I was kind of done. I grew up in California where there were no seasons. And then I went to Minnesota where there were kind of 2 seasons and a half, because you have a lot of winter and you have an intense short summer. And then if you blink, spring and fall are kind of, they happen very quickly. So So I was, so somebody said, come on out here and check it out. And I did. And I actually took my first ever vacation, literally the first ever one that I ever took. And I came out here and stayed with my friend, her and her husband, and they showed me around, and I spent time just hanging around in Denver. And I was out here for about a week, and I went back and I was like, I'm getting the money together. I'm getting my apartment leased. I turned in the thing on my apartment, and I quit my job, and I did all the things, and I hightailed it out here. And I got an apartment right away, and started going, and picked up, and you guys followed all that on my channel. So that's the story. Yes, Boulder. Yeah, California is nice for the weather, but boy, is it static, I mean, I grew up there. It's like, unless you were, except for the fire seasons, there's not a lot of variation in the weather out there. Not like there is in other places. All right. We've been at this for half an hour. Let's get into the actual topic before I completely blow all this off. And this is, by the way, the subject of the podcast this week. My Sensibly Speaking podcast dropping tomorrow is me going into some detail. I'm not going to go into all the detail tonight that I went into in my podcast. You'll see that tomorrow. But I did want to ask you guys some questions and sort of see what you all had to say or think about this. Because basically, in 2023, we are now in a cult awareness environment. We're in a place where the media is savvy to, and public in general have at least heard probably something about NXIVM or about Scientology or about the Mormons or the JWs, or, there's a lot of news stories out there, and from time to time they pop up, up to the cable news, major media level, and there's enough talk and discussion, and there's been enough views on enough videos and podcasts, and also, of course, the aftermath to the aftermath show. Like, what are we dealing with? Well, all the years of viewing of that show, and the Going Clear documentary, and all the other documentaries, Cults and Extreme Beliefs on A&E, and all these other shows. There's, it's very, very easy to be a cult watcher at this point. And that tells me that we're in an environment where cults are going to have a really hard time thriving. It's not the case that they are just going to disappear. We're not going to see them anymore, anything like that. Let's not fool ourselves about the situation. People are people, and there are always going to be cults. But the awareness of it, what we do about it, the fact that it is a psychologically and financially and physically damaging thing, and that children who get involved in this have often been exploited, labor trafficking, sex trafficking, etc. This is nasty, nasty stuff. And I think that to some degree, the blinders are kind of off, or at least the blinders are a little thinner, if you will, a little bit more lights coming in when it comes to how people are thinking about or talking about cults. I'm just looking at some of the thing here. Yeah, just a lot of examples of all this stuff. I have been to New York City, by the way, Michael. Yes. Been there twice. Very short trips. Okay, so in order to stay out of a cult, in order to make sure you never get involved in a cult, what would you say you need to do? What do you think? Because I have really two basic points that I almost could guarantee you would keep you out of any cultic group, and possibly if you applied this or used this, contextually in a relationship setting, then you could keep a clear enough head that you could also use these principles to avoid falling into a bad, narcissistic, predatory relationship. But I didn't write it for that or think about it necessarily in that context. But it kind of is similar stuff, right? Join a good cult. Yes, not need to have a purpose in life, not drifting around. Good. Okay, so the 2 points that I'm looking at, quite simply, are one, this is going to sound kind of glib, like it's like really, but it's avoid emotional intensity in your life. And that's not to say don't ever have highs and lows or don't feel good or feel bad, but you know, the number one thing I've said for years that appeal to emotion and appeal to authority are two logical fallacies. We talk about logical fallacies every week, right? Appeal to emotion is a fallacy. You can rile people's emotions up. You can get them feeling a certain way. And because they feel this way, the thinking kind of disappears or is lessened. The willingness, the desire even to engage in any kind of critical thinking or fact checking or let's look a little deeper into this, it goes away. And this is why I have been harping for years on this idea that critical thinking has got to involve an understanding of your emotional state, your emotional intelligence. It's got to be part of the package. If you only talk about rhetoric and debate and logical fallacies, and I'm going to poke holes in your argument, you're going to get suckered into a cult just like that. It's not a problem, right? Whatever logic you think you're bringing to the equation, cults that have been around for decades have heard every single argument you're going to make, and they've got a ready-made script to derail it. You're not going to out-logic them, but what they're going to try to do to you is they're going to try to out-emotion you. They're going to try to rile your emotions up, and it's not that hard to do with people, especially people who are not emotionally aware or have emotional intelligence. So this business of being mindful, and I hesitate using that word because I know it's a word that has a lot of different weird connotations, and yoga and all this stuff, meditation. I'm just saying be aware. It's a situational awareness. It's kind of like something pilots are trained to do, right? Like you're always examining, you're always aware, you're always sort of surveying what's going on. And that is something you need to develop as an introspective awareness or perception. What is my emotional state right now? Am I high? Am I low? Am I good? Am I bad? Most of the time, this is not that hard to do. It's how you feel, right? But if you start finding yourself feeling unusually high, giddy, euphoric, awe-inspired, right? You might start needing to question how that's happening if it's in one of these recruitment situations. I worded this a lot better in my podcast, but it's basically this business of avoid emotional intensity, right? And I gave a bunch of tips in the podcast as to doing that. What I was curious about in coming into the show today was whether I might be able to get any feedback from you guys on how you do that, because I know how I do that, and I realize that I'm probably assuming an awful lot because I'm a very introspective, kind of educated, and I've been playing around with this stuff for decades in and out of Scientology. In Scientology, emotional manipulation was part of the toolkit, and I absolutely knew I was doing it from time to time in order to get the product I needed to get. So this is not just something I learned about in school. I was doing it. And then you come out and then you realize how bad all that is and how damaging it is and all that. And then you're like, okay, really be aware of where you're at, what's going on around you, and keep that little monitor. This is how I do it, right? I don't know how else to describe it. Keep that little monitor in the back of your head, that little voice going, hey, man, like right now you're feeling really good, right? Maybe this isn't the best time to be making any really serious decisions. Because I'll tell you, the last thing you ever want to do is get yourself into some awe-inspiring, euphoric, fervent state and then start making very important financial or life-changing decisions for yourself. You never want to do that, ever. There's never. You always want to give yourself time and reflection. And however good this thing is right now, it's going to be just as good tomorrow, That's kind of the point, where they get you, where you're not thinking, you're feeling, you're excited, you're reacting, you're, do it. Impulse is good, YOLO and all that. That's the state they want to get you in. So how do you guys keep yourselves aware of that and restrain yourselves? That's what I'm a little curious about. Yeah, it's an awful lot like feeling in love, Xian. It really is. Yes. Yeah, I'm saying that Henny, I'm not necessarily implying that I want you to disassociate or emotionally detach from yourself or your emotions. I don't mean anything quite that dramatic. I mean something more along the lines of just having that little voice or monitor in the back of your head, a little awareness of how you're doing, what you're doing. There's a thing called interoception, if I'm remembering that word right. Let me check that real fast. Interoception, I think it is. Yeah, interoception is a lesser known sense that helps you understand and feel what's going on inside your body. Right? It's what your brain does. Your brain is constantly paying attention to the state of your body and giving and adjusting itself and making changes accordingly. And you can kind of tune into that a little bit. Be a little aware of that. Well, how's my body feeling? How's my stomach feeling? How's my blood flow going? How am I feeling right now? That's kind of what I'm suggesting. I do not know if the Cult Awareness Network is still around. I think they are, and yes, they are still run by Scientology. If they are, Scientology still owns that lock, stock, and barrel, as I understand it. Oh, that's interesting. I'm being asked a question here about anger in Scientology with emotional manipulation. Could you explain how Scientology views anger as emotional manipulation? How is it supposed to work? Could you explain caving in someone? Well, caving in someone is not a good thing. That's a bad thing in Scientology. It's viewed as a bad thing. It's using anger and hostility and force to drive somebody's into an introverted state. That's what being caved in means. It means you're like, oh, I'm so bad, I'm so awful. You're caved in, you're introverted, you're heavily introspective to an unhealthy degree, and somebody did that to you through force and yelling and screaming or pushing you around or abusing you or something like that. That's how I always understood caving somebody in. And it was rarely looked at in Scientology as something that that you would want to do. Adria, the call-in line is working. I'm just finishing my thoughts here. Sorry about that. Anger is used as emotional manipulation in Scientology because anger is considered a way of, you are told as a Scientology executive or staff member or even public person that you need to use anger as a tool in order to impinge on somebody, make a dent in their space, in other words, so that they get that you are more of a threat to them than their reactive mind, than their stress and trauma and problems and interior voices. and you're such a threat to them that they overcome their own internal issues and problems and get the job done you need them to do. So in other words, if somebody's not getting the job done, they're introverted, they're upset, they've got problems or issues, or they're just not getting the work done, you are fully justified in Scientology as an executive going over there and ripping their face off, just giving them a complete what for, and impinging on their bank and putting two gruesomes in place. And a too gruesome is a disciplinary measure where you give somebody something as a threat that is so awful, it's too gruesome for them to deal with. You know, if this person has a problem with washing dishes and you go, you're going to be washing dishes until 4 a.m, asshole, if you don't get this job done, right? You've issued a too gruesome to this person. That's the Scientology lingo. And that is done on purpose, not as an off the cuff, you know, angry, impulsive thing. It's done as a premeditated action by Scientology executives because that's how Hubbard says to treat people. So that's what I can say. At least that was the first thing that came to mind when I was thinking about that. Now, let's pick up Adria here. Hello, Adria, you are on.
Hi, Chris. Sorry I missed tardy to the party tonight.
Oh, no worries. And sorry I took so long picking up your call. What you got on your mind tonight?
Oh, I just wanted to answer your question.
Yeah.
Now, I didn't get around to watching your latest podcast on this yet.
It posts tomorrow.
Right now.
You wouldn't have been able to see it yet.
Oh, wow. Well, then I don't feel bad. I'm a podcast behind it.
Yeah, it's kind of funny.
Well,
I've already
have a TARDIS, I'm good.
I'm sorry, say that again?
Since I don't have a TARDIS, I'm good.
That's right. There you go. So what's your feedback for me?
Okay, well, a mentor of mine a couple decades ago taught me something that I have found useful so far, the rest of my life, and that has been the acronym HALT, which means stop, HALT. So 4 letters, HALT, they stand for hungry, angry, lonely, tired. And I find that if I have a major decision to make, I stop and I check myself. Am I hungry? Am I angry? Am I lonely? Am I tired? Because I tend to skew toward the more depressive side. So HALT is a very useful acronym for me. I don't tend to skew towards the life is grand side, something I would love to have happen more. And I'm working on that. And I am taking my antidepressants.
Cool.
But it's just a way to check myself before a major decision. And I also find that it's very helpful to have some friends who know me very well, who I trust and who I know have my best interests at heart. So another thing I do is I'll bounce it around some of my really close friends who have been around the block themselves. And, community is very helpful in, discerning things.
Yeah, big time. In fact, I'm really glad you brought that up because that is a point that I made in the show is, making sure you have a support network, right? You have friends around or family or something. How has that worked for you? How has that HALT principle worked for you in terms of in the moment? Is this something that you're able to keep in mind even when things are incredibly good or incredibly bad?
Yeah, actually, HALT's been very helpful for me because it's short enough and small enough for me to remember.
Yep.
And it also tells me what I need to do, like, HALT, stop.
That's what I like about it.
I guess it's similar to blink and think.
Right.
So HALT's been helpful for me. But another thing that I do is, let's say I'm wrapped up in the emotion and I can't stop myself from doing something about it, then what I do is, another technique of mine is I'll write down everything I'm thinking. I'll just take a sheet of paper or I'll take my laptop and I will, if I can't stop myself from doing something about it, I'll write down everything I can think of about it. Because, sometimes things happen at 3 a.m. and you have tons of emotions and nobody's awake to talk with, and you've got to do something with it. So I just write it all down.
Perfect.
And then I find once it's all down, I can put it aside, I can go to sleep, and then the next day I can talk with my community about it.
Perfect.
So
thank you. That's very helpful, Adria. I really appreciate that.
Oh, you're welcome.
Yeah. No, that's really that's a good point. I'm going to keep that in mind. Yay! All right. Thanks for the call.
Oh, you're welcome. Give my greetings to Melissa and Benson, please.
Absolutely. Will do. Okay. Bye-bye.
Thanks. Bye.
All right. Good. Now we've got a lot to cover. That was really good. I'm absolutely keeping that. Now, Henny, you asked the second point because I'm like, got to get to it. And it's really simple, okay? Keep your head about you, okay? Keep the emotional intelligence, there. And the second thing is do your damn research. Everybody's in such a hurry these days. If you want to stay out of a cult, you have got to do your research. Now, there's more to it than that. I've got some points on this. And like I said, I'll go over, I go over all this in a lot more detail in the podcast. But this is, here I'm talking about, not buying now, not buying into the nonsense. Don't sign a goddamn thing. Never sign a legally binding contract if you don't know what you're giving up or signing yourself over to. Period. We have been attuned to and manipulated into thinking terms of service don't matter, aren't important. Click on the button and just move on. And Scientologists, former Scientologists, have found, to their tragic detriment, that those contracts have teeth and matter, and they come back and bite them hard years later. Because in the moment, it wasn't anything. It wasn't any big deal. Nobody cared. Just legal mumbo jumbo. Who cares? Sign in. I already told you everything that's there anyway. You already know. It's no big deal. We're a good bunch of guys. Hey, let's get you on that course. Let's get you into that auditing session. Come on. Let's go. Now, right? It's all about now. Give us your money. Let's get you in. Let's go. Let's get that adrenaline rush, right? Let's get that dopamine hit. That's what it's all about. And it's on you, at that moment, it's on you to not fall for it. We can point and scream and yell about how manipulative and awful these cult recruiters are, and they are. I was one. I was an awful person. But we can also look at the fact that you've still got full power of choice before you sign that dotted line. You've got the ability to stop the entire thing in its tracks before it even gets started, if you will keep your head about you. And you just can't stress that kind of thing enough. It's super, super important. So it's a thing of maintaining that emotional mindness, and then it's a matter of, okay, what do I really know here? And I go into, like I said, in the podcast, I'll give you guys a lot more detail about what exactly I mean by doing your research, both on site, when you're in there, if you're in a cult, office, or you're in some large group awareness training thing, or you're in some situation where you're suddenly, you got people around you trying to sell you this thing or trying to convince you to join or something. Like, what do you do in that situation? And then, what do you do when you get yourself extricated from that situation? And some strategies on how to extricate yourself from that situation. Go over all that in the podcast. So, but the thing is that the whole buy now, drop everything, run to the ATM, get the money. You got to do this now. It's a buy now. If you don't do it today, you're not going to get this deal. You got to habituate yourself to just not give any of that any importance. And it's so easy to get caught up in the moment. And that's what they're trying to do to you, is get you caught up in the moment so you'll make stupid, foolish decisions. And unfortunately, people don't take what would be an hour or two. And they end up tragically losing days, months, years of their lives. Bankrupt, destitute, shunned from their family. I mean, lots of tragic consequences that could have been prevented with literally an hour or two of some time investment at the beginning of this whole thing. So, that's kind of where I'm coming from on this, is the accumulated wisdom of the last decade of my life learning about all this stuff. And it's like, what does it come down to? Well, it kind of comes down to those two things, really. At the end of the day, nobody else can do this for you. If you want to keep yourself safe and keep yourself out of bad situations and bad relationships, you have got to keep your eyes open, and you got to know what you're getting into before you get into it, despite every single emotional, manipulative reason that they're going to use to hook you anyway, right? It's on you to keep your head straight and not fall for that stuff. And a lot of us have a perfectly easy time doing this when it's stuff we're not invested in. So it's not like we can't do this. We do it all the time. It's just the challenge comes in those moments where we are interested. We are a prospect. We are somebody who's interested and wants this new product that this person is trying to sell us, called a cult membership, right? Or called membership in this organization or group or activity. There's just no other way around it. And this is the benefit of an awful lot of hindsight and an awful lot of, thinking and looking and talking and interviewing and all that. But at the end of the day, it's pretty simple. It really is. But it's simple enough that it can fool you into thinking you already know all this. And most people, I'm sorry, but empirically speaking, just looking around at the world and how people act, most people might say they know these two things that I'm talking about, but they don't practice it if they do. I don't know what else to say. So, yeah. Oh, that's a great one, Adria. That's a great one. What would I tell someone else if they told me about this situation? That's good. I like that one. Oh, good. All right. So let's go ahead and wrap up the show here. I did not show you guys my little doggy. So let's see. Nope, not that. That's the wrong button. Silly. There it is. Is that it? There he is. There's our little Benson cam for this week. I did take it, so I wanted to show you guys. This is Benson chilling in the living room. And we just, I cannot even begin to tell you. He's just totally chill today. He was just kicking it on the couch. He is a very energetic little dog, but then at the end of the day, he's totally chill because he gets all tired out. We have fallen in love with this dog to a degree I could not even put to words anymore. It's like a little kid. We just love this dog. All right. So there's some Benson cam for you. And let's go ahead and do our logical fallacy cards. And I'm wondering, I'm going to quickly look through here and see if I can. There it is. Appeal to emotion. Manipulating an emotional response in place of a valid or compelling argument. Luke didn't want to eat his sheep brains with chopped liver and Brussels sprouts, but his father told him to think about the poor, starving children in a third world country who weren't fortunate enough to have any food at all. Appeal to emotion. It comes in 1,000 shapes and sizes, and it hits us every day, all day. It's not like this is some, weird thing that happens in back rooms. We all do this to each other all the time. And the more you're kind of mindful, thoughtful, kind of looking, watching, situational awareness, the more you'll see it too, because it's out there. All right, guys. So this was our first show for 2023. I hope it was a success. I love talking to you guys. Adria, your suggestions there were awesome. David, also, thank you for calling in. I hope we will get more of an audience and build this show up more over this year. If you guys have any suggestions for me or anything that I actually can pull off, I'm all ears as to how I might grow my audience. I am a one-man band trying to play a symphony every week and doing the best I can with that. So if you like the shows and want to support the show, anything like that, there's Patreon, there's PayPal, there's Venmo. All that stuff is in the links. And with that, we'll wrap up. All right, guys, I will see you next week. Oh, watch for the podcast tomorrow. Q&A show on Sunday as usual. All right. Bye-bye.